Welcome to the deep dive. We are your guide through what can often feel like a dense fog of information. You give us the sources, official documents, biographies, news reports, and our job is really to synthesize it all for you. We try to cut through the noise so you get the verified context, the facts, and maybe some surprising connections. Today, we're undertaking a pretty critical deep dive. We're looking into a high-profile event from September 2568, that's 2025, for most of us, which definitely captured a lot of public attention. It concerns the sudden and voluntary disrobing of a very senior, very respected figure. Nak Tham Ek Phra Khru Pariyattawattanakit. Now, the initial headlines, as they often do, focus heavily on the drama, the rumors swirling around. Our mission here today is quite different. We're filtering through the verifiable facts. We want to understand his nearly 5 decades in the sign of the Buddhist monkhood. We need to look at the man's credentials, his actual administrative authority, the system he operated within, and crucially, the precise wording of the official statements about his departure. So we're aiming to move past the sensationalism, really, to get to the institutional reality. Let's unpack this important story.
Absolutely. I think what's really fascinating here, or perhaps essential to grasp, is that to understand the impact of this sudden departure, you first have to appreciate the stature he'd achieved. I mean, the official record paints a picture of significant academic achievement, decades of administrative trust. It sets a very high benchmark, and that context makes the final crisis, well, all the more remarkable, doesn't it?
That contrast is exactly where we need to begin, I think. When we look at the records for Phra Khru Pariyattawattanakit, his monastic name being Phra Saman Yanawaddhano, we're not just talking about any monk. We're looking at someone who was really quite high up in the ecclesiastical system. The source had confirmed that as of September 2568, he was 66 years old. And he had an impressive Vassa that's years in the monkhood of 46. 46 years. That's nearly half a century. It's a lifetime commitment, really, devoted to the saffron robes. And his educational path clearly shows a dedication to what the Sangha calls Kanthathura. That's the path focusing on scriptural study, textual learning. And that path, well, it isn't easy. It's known to be highly demanding.
Exactly. And the specific religious education he undertook, that's really the bedrock measure of intellectual capacity and traditional authority within the Thai Sangha. He achieved Nak Tham Ek. That's the highest level in the general religious curriculum, which is already significant. But for someone who later holds positions of, considerable administrative power, the truly key milestone is achieving Pariyattawattanakit 3, often shortened to P.8.
Okay, P.8. Can you tell us a bit more about that? Why is it considered such a major achievement, and what does it really signify about his standing within the clergy?
Well, think of the Pariyattawattanakit curriculum almost like a very rigorous university degree, but focused entirely on Pali, the canonical language, and the core Dharma texts. PT3 is the foundational degree, let's say. Achieving it confirms that a monk has mastered the basics of the Pali scriptural path, as required by the Mahathera Council, the governing body. It proves he can read, understand, and interpret the original language and the core scriptures. It's difficult to overstate the kind of social and intellectual capital this grants a monk within the Sangha structure.
Right. And the records show he achieved this quite early in his monastic career, way back in BE 2524, which is 1981. That timing suggests he was not only dedicated, but also intellectually sharp right from the start. It sort of sets the stage for taking on administrative responsibilities later on.
Precisely. It's really the necessary foundation. You simply don't see monks without these kinds of textual credentials rising to high administrative ranks, especially not in major city temples. But what makes his profile particularly contemporary, as you pointed out, is how he bridged the sacred and the secular. The sources are clear. He didn't just stop with the religious texts. He also pursued a parallel academic degree. He obtained a Master of Arts, a source or more.
So he was deeply knowledgeable in ancient scripture, and he held advanced modern academic qualifications. That feels like a very specific, maybe even somewhat unusual combination.
It's actually becoming the defining hallmark of the modern high-level urban cleric. If you connect the dots, this blend, the PTH3, showing traditional textual mastery combined with an MA in a secular field, it perfectly fits the profile of what we often call executive monks, or Phra Porihan, Sanghatantan. These individuals are expected to be scholars, absolutely, but they also have to function almost like CEOs for what are often large, multi-million baht institutions. These temples manage big congregations, extensive property portfolios, complex service operations like hospitals or schools sometimes.
So it's a dual role, really.
Exactly. The challenge is immense. They have to maintain the traditional discipline, the deep knowledge expected within the Sangha, but at the same time, they need to apply modern managerial principles effectively. This specific combination of skills is pretty much essential for someone who's entrusted with a key administrative role in a major, busy temple like Wat Hua Lamphong. His profile wasn't just about personal piety, you see. It was fundamentally about institutional capability. And understanding this intellectual and administrative foundation is, I think, why the events of September 2568 sent such shockwaves through the institution.
Okay, so this strong foundation in both religious and secular knowledge seems to lead directly into the story of his institutional career, the trust placed in him over decades. The sources we have meticulously trace this steady climb up the ladder of ecclesiastical rank. It shows consistent approval from the governing bodies of the Thai Sangha. And this progression, it culminated in his appointment at Wat Hua Lamphong, which isn't just any temple, it's a royal temple, a Phra Aram Luang. That status, Phra Aram Luang, gives it national significance, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. And that steady climb you mentioned, it signifies continuous endorsement from the top. Ecclesiastical rank in Thailand isn't just handed out, it's a very formal structure. It's designed to reward merit, yes, but also longevity and, crucially, perceived competence and reliability.
Let's walk through that timeline because it really illustrates the systemic faith invested in him over many years. According to the Sangha registry documents, his first significant step up came in BE 2541, that's 1998. He was appointed as a contractual ecclesiastical officer at Phra Khru Sanyabat. At this point, he was an assistant abbot, but at a common temple, what's called a Wat Rat. And that's when he received the title Phra Khru Pariyattawattanakit, initially at the Class Saman level.
Right, so that first appointment gave him crucial experience in the day-to-day running of a temple. Basic administration, dealing with the local community. But the really significant leap, the one that put him on the path to major responsibility, came just 4 years later, BE 2545, so 2002. This is when he was elevated, keeping the same title, the same royal name, Phra Khru Pariyattawattanakit. But now his role was assistant abbot of a royal temple specifically, Wat Hua Lamphong, right in Bangkok. And the difference between managing a local Wat Rat and being an assistant abbot at a Phra Aram Luang in the capital, well, it's immense, both in terms of prestige and the sheer volume of administrative work involved.
And the sources are very clear on this point. This promotion wasn't just an internal temple decision. It was confirmed by official documents from the Mahathera Council itself, the Maha Therasamakam. So that means the absolute highest governing body of the Thai Sangha officially signed off on putting him in a central, quite sensitive position within the capital's religious infrastructure.
Yes, exactly. The complexity and the sheer volume of responsibilities at a major urban royal temple like Wat Hua Lamphong, it demands more than just knowledge. It requires, frankly, political skill, diplomacy, and deep institutional loyalty. The fact that the Mahathera Council confirmed his appointment indicates he was seen as a very safe pair of hands, someone they could trust implicitly.
And that trust didn't waver. It actually continued to build over the next decade. The administrative peak of his career, according to the records, came on a specific date, December 5th, BE 2555, that's 2012. Our sources show he received a further elevation, this time to the special class, or Chanfis within that same title of Phra Khru Pariyattawattanakit.
That special class elevation, Chanfizit, is really the administrative capstone. It's the top tier for that particular rank. It sends a clear signal throughout the Sangha hierarchy. This individual is considered indispensable, highly competent, highly trusted. It shows continuous successful progression and confirms the highest level of administrative confidence placed in him. It effectively meant he wasn't just an administrator. He was a key figure in the executive management team of one of Bangkok's busiest and most prominent royal temples.
So the implication of his role specifically at Wat Hua Lamphong is huge because royal temples, they're often the sites for critical national ceremonies, state events, and they handle vast resources, both financial and cultural. Being an assistant abbot there, especially at the special class level, placed him right at the heart of governance and ceremony, Ngan Pakrong Le Fithikan, as the sources term it. He was operating at this high level of institutional management for, over 2 decades by the time the crisis hit?
That's right. Over 20 years in that specific high-pressure environment. So we need to hold this image firmly in our minds as we proceed. Here's a monk with 46 years in robes, a PTA3 scholar, holding this special class rank, helping manage a major royal temple in the capital. This is the established background. This is the stature against which the subsequent allegations and his sudden departure must be measured. This wasn't some minor, obscure cleric involved in a local dispute. This was a man whose entire career was built on and validated by the confidence of the most senior ecclesiastical authorities in Thailand.
Okay, so we've established the rank, the credentials, the long-standing trust. Now let's shift focus a bit. from the sort of abstract concept of rank to the concrete, day-to-day reality of his duties. To really understand the potential gravity of the financial and personal allegations that surface later, we need to zero in on exactly where his responsibilities lay within the temple's operational structure. And the official clarifications that came from the temple after the incident, which are absolutely crucial sources for us here, they pinpoint his primary operational focus quite specifically. It was the temple's Hao Klanjan Khan, the cremation service operations.
And this is a critical detail, absolutely critical. In a large, busy Bangkok temple like Wat Ho Lamphong, the cremation service is often the most consistently active part of the temple, and it's also one of the most financially complex operations. You're dealing with families during times of intense grief, coordinating halls, monks for chanting, catering, managing offerings, donations. It involves handling very sensitive arrangements and, yes, significant financial flows.
His specific role, as the source material explicitly notes, was coordinating the reservation of the merit-making halls, the Sala Bamphon Kusol, with the families who were using the cremation facilities. That sounds like a key administrative junction point, doesn't it? A place where he would be interacting directly with grieving families, logistical arrangements, and potentially the associated funds.
Exactly. That's why this specific role placed him right in the administrative center of gravity for that part of the temple's activities. And perhaps inevitably, it's why the allegations that surfaced later seem to target this area. However, and this is where careful reading of the sources is paramount, the temple's official clarification, issued very quickly after the rumors broke, was immediately clear about the financial structure related to these cremation services. The source material makes a point of contextualizing the financial oversight, precisely because this is an area inherently prone to speculation and, well, potential suspicion.
Right. And what exactly did the temple clarify about that financial structure? How were things supposed to work, according to them?
They stated very clearly that the financial system for the cremation services was not under the assistant abbots, meaning Phra Khru Pariyattawattanakit's sole unilateral control. This is the key institutional defense mechanism that's detailed right there in the source material, in the temple's formal response.
Okay. And we see that specific point mentioned consistently across the media reports that cited the temple's formal letter. They actually detailed a governance structure, one designed presumably for checks and balances. It stated that the financial system for the creation services was managed collectively by a committee of 5 monks. 5 monks. Okay, that sounds fairly robust, at least on paper. But for our listeners, what does a 5-month committee managing finances actually entail in practice? Does the source material give us any indication of how easily a system like that could theoretically be bypassed? Or was there continuous auditing? And maybe more importantly, given that structure was in place, does the source material indicate if any kind of formal internal audit was launched before the social media crisis erupted?
That's a really sharp question, and it forces us to stick very strictly to what the provided documentation actually says. The source material doesn't detail any pre-crisis internal audit specifically initiated by the temple regarding his area. There's no mention of that. What it does detail is the structure itself and the stated intention behind that structure. The explicit goal of using 5 monks was decentralization of control, spreading the responsibility. Furthermore, the abbot himself served as the chairman of this committee. That means the ultimate authority, the oversight, rested with the highest-ranking monks in the temple. And crucially, the temple's statement also asserted that accounting records, Bancharai Raprai Jai, were maintained regularly and systematically.
So the implication is there were procedures.
Yes. If we connect this to the bigger picture of institutional governance, the structure they describe suggests that any single monk, even a senior executive monk, like Phra Khru Pariyattawattanakit, would theoretically need the active complicity, or at least the gross negligence, of 4 other monks plus the abbot to carry out any major sustained financial misconduct within that specific system.
So, the very existence of this detailed committee structure, which the temple highlighted immediately, serves as their official counter-argument to those initial financial allegations that were flying around. The source material seems to frame the allegation against the backdrop of what was presented as a controlled, multi-person system. The implication being, if any financial wrongdoing had occurred in that area, it would likely have needed to be systemic, involving multiple people, not just the act of one individual operating completely alone.
Exactly. And this context becomes absolutely critical when we move on to discuss the actual crisis itself. Because when the allegations hit social media with such force, the institution could immediately point to 2 things. First, its established governance structure for that area, and second, its lack of any internally produced evidence confirming the rumors. This became their primary defense of their operational integrity, even while they were scrambling to manage the intense public relations crisis that unfolded.
All right, so we've painted a picture. High status, deep learning, long service, and a position within what was described as a carefully structured financial operation. Now, we have to turn to the truly dramatic events of September 2568. The events that brought this incredibly long, 46-year monastic career to such an abrupt and unexpected end. And it seems absolutely essential to stress this point based purely on the sequence described in the sources. The catalyst was not the conclusion of any formal investigation by the temple or authorities. The crisis was triggered entirely by rumors. That's the word used. Rumors disseminated rapidly and widely on social media.
And this is where we see that stark, almost violent collision between centuries of tradition and the speed of the modern information environment. A venerable 46-year career, built painstakingly through decades of service and study, could seemingly be overturned or at least fundamentally challenged in a matter of hours, all driven by anonymous, initially unverified complaints amplified across digital platforms like Facebook or Line. The sheer speed of the rumor mill essentially dictated the reaction time for the institution. They had very little time to respond.
And the decision made by Phra Khru Pariyattawattanakit himself was incredibly swift, wasn't it? Almost immediate. He voluntarily expressed his intention to disrobe to perform lasika directly to the abbot. The sources even document the precise date and time, September 18th, 2568 at 7:10 in the evening. That level of precision and the swiftness, it really suggests intense, perhaps overwhelming immediate pressure.
Oh, absolutely. That time frame, just hours or a day after the rumors likely gained major traction, tells a story of extreme urgency. The pressure was probably coming from multiple directions simultaneously. You'd have the external outrage fueled by social media, potentially calls from the press, public concern. And then, almost certainly, there would have been internal institutional pressure, perhaps from the abbot, maybe other senior monks urging swift action to contain the damage, to stop it spreading further, tarnishing the reputation of the entire temple, and potentially reflecting badly on the broader Sangha itself.
And the official rationale given for this voluntary act, this is what really defines the entire incident from the temple's documented perspective. The core reason, the one stated clearly in the abbot's subsequent written clarification to the public and media, was his personal desire to prevent the circulating rumors from causing further harm. Specifically, the statement said he wanted to avoid damaging the image and reputation of Wat Hua Lamphong and, more broadly, the image of the Buddhist religion in Thailand. That's presented as a very powerful, almost sacrificial motive, isn't it? Choosing to give up everything, his robes, his rank, his community, essentially to protect the institution, even before any official investigation had concluded or found evidence against him.
It speaks volumes, absolutely volumes, about the immense value placed on reputational management, especially for a major religious institution, in the face of a modern, fast-moving crisis. You have to understand, for a monk of his age and standing, disrobing is the ultimate act. It's an irreversible severance from a life built over nearly 5 decades. It means relinquishing decades of accumulated spiritual merit, social status, his entire community, his home. Choosing to do this voluntarily and framing it explicitly as an act of institutional protection strongly suggests that the perceived threat from the social media firestorm was judged to be greater, more immediate, and potentially more damaging in the long run than the value of his own distinguished career and personal reputation.
So it was a calculation.
It certainly implies a strategic calculation, yes. Perhaps the thinking was, waiting for a formal investigation to potentially clear his name could take weeks, maybe months. And during that entire period, the rumors would likely continue to circulate, fester, and severely defame the royal temple, causing ongoing reputational bleeding. By choosing immediate voluntary departure, he instantly changes the narrative. It shifts, at least slightly, from, is there a corrupt senior monk currently at Wat Hua Lamphong, to a former monk, now a layman, stepped down amidst rumors to clear the air and protect the temple. It's essentially a public relations containment strategy, one that was then codified and explained in the abbot's official statement after the fact.
Okay, this brings us now to what might be the most critical section for you, the listener, trying to make sense of all this. We need to very carefully separate the allegations from the evidence, based strictly on what the official sources, primarily the temple itself, via the abbot stated. So the crucial question is, what did the institution actually find? Or perhaps more accurately, what did they state they didn't find? The template for their public clarification seems to have been set almost immediately after the disrobing occurred. Looking across multiple major news sources that reported on this outlets like Madhushan, Tyrath, MGR Online, the message citing the temple's formal letter was remarkably consistent.
Yes, the temple adopted a very clear, impartial stance, which was encapsulated in that key phrase they used repeatedly. Now, translated directly and carefully, that means the temple has not yet found or seen produced any evidence. And this specific denial was applied directly to the major categories of allegations that were circulating online. Both the claims of sexual misconduct or improper relationships Jusao and the very damaging claims of embezzlement or misuse of temple funds, Yakyokungonwat.
Right. And we really need to hammer home the legal and factual distinction here because it's absolutely paramount for understanding the situation as presented by the sources. The sources consistently frame these issues as allegations or complaints. They originated from third parties, disseminated primarily online. There is absolutely no mention anywhere in the source material we reviewed of any court judgment against him, no confirmed findings from a police investigation, no admission of guilt. Just allegations versus the temple's statement of no evidence found.
Exactly. And this is where we circle back to the governance structure we discussed earlier in Section 3. That financial oversight mechanism, the five-monk committee chaired by the abbot, the stated systematic record-keeping that became the institution's firewall, their first line of defense. When confronted publicly by these financial allegations, the temple could stand behind two core points. First, that a robust structure designed for oversight was indeed in place, and second, that despite checking internally, presumably after the rumor surfaced, no evidence had been found by the temple itself to confirm the specific claims of funds being illegally transferred, misappropriated, or going missing from the cremation service accounts.
Furthermore, the abbot himself took a very active role in addressing the media directly. He didn't just rely on the written statement. And in doing so, he strategically targeted some of the most specific and perhaps most sensational rumors in an attempt to discredit the overall narrative of misconduct that was taking hold. Our sources specifically note that the abbot directly addressed that wild rumor about the monk having supposedly purchased a 30 million bat house for a laywoman.
Yes, that was a key moment in the temple's response. The abbot stated unequivocally, on the record to the press, that this specific high-value rumor was not true. Flat denial. This kind of strategic denial of a concrete, potentially verifiable claim, like a multi-million bat house purchase, is a classic institutional tactic. It's an attempt to inject a hard fact, or at least a strong denial of a specific factoid, into a highly emotional, rumor-driven environment. The hope is that by debunking one sensational part of the story, it might cast doubt on the credibility of the wider, less specific narrative of corruption.
And the abbot consistently reinforced the motive behind the disrobing itself. He reiterated that it was solely driven by the former monk's own desire not to allow the temple to be defamed by these unsubstantiated rumors. The abbot even went so far, according to reports, as to publicly ask for forgiveness for those who were spreading what he termed false information, essentially appealing for discretion and critical thinking from the public amidst the social media frenzy.
Right. So this collective response package, the broad institutional denial of having found evidence, the highlighting of the structural defense of financial oversight, the specific refutation of key sensational claims by the abbot, and the framing of the disrobing as a voluntary act of protection. This constitutes the factual record as presented by the official sources that we must work from. What's left for us then is the analysis of the broader implications. And the starkest implication, really, is the sheer power demonstrated by unverified social media information. The power to compel an executive monk of this considerable rank and long standing to choose voluntary exile, even while the institution he dedicated nearly 5 decades to officially maintain no evidence found. That, I think, is the ultimate takeaway here. It underscores the potential fragility of even very established traditional institutions like the Sangha when confronted by the speed and reach of modern information or misinformation acceleration. The decision-making process clearly prioritized immediate reputational risk mitigation above all else, even above the methodical, potentially lengthy process of defending a 46-year career against unproven claims. It's as if the public trial, held instantaneously in the court of social media, effectively concluded long before any formal institutional or legal investigation could even properly begin. And that rendered the temple's subsequent factual defenses largely moot, at least in the realm of immediate public perception.
It really paints a picture of institutional leadership caught in an almost impossible situation, doesn't it? Their choices seem to have been either mount a defense of the individual monk, potentially allowing the temple's own image to be dragged through the mud for weeks or months while investigations proceed, or accept the individual's offer of voluntary departure, instantly contain the crisis from an institutional standpoint, and try to move forward by drawing a line under the affair.
And they clearly chose containment. The very fact that an individual possessing PT3 credentials, holding the highest special class rank within his title, confirmed multiple times by the Mahathera Council over decades. The fact that such a figure could be effectively forced out by unproven rumors amplified online, that marks a seismic event. It tells us a lot about how power, reputation, and accountability are being judged and contested in the modern age, even within deeply traditional structures. Tag, outro.
So let's try to synthesize this journey we've taken, following the threads through the source material. We started by mapping the profile of Phra Khru Pariyattawattanakit, a figure defined by quite significant dual expertise, a scholar grounded in traditional Pali Studies, (8), and also a modern executive administrator, evidenced by his master's degree in achieving the special class rank. He held a key position at a major royal temple, Lamphong, specifically involved in managing the high-traffic, sensitive cremation services connection. This long and apparently stable career, seemingly defined by decades of institutional trust and steady advancement, then culminated in this sudden voluntary disrobing in September 2568. And crucially, this departure was explicitly prompted entirely by online rumors, not by any finding of wrongdoing by the temple itself. In fact, it occurred despite the temple's formal, official, and widely reported statement that no evidence supporting the key allegations, financial misconduct, or improper personal affairs had actually been found by them. The documentation strongly points towards institutional image protection as the decisive factor in how the situation was resolved so quickly.
And if we try to connect this specific case to the bigger picture, I think this entire incident raises a really unavoidable question for you, the listener, as someone trying to navigate complex news stories. When these high-profile events occur, shaking institutions, we often place a lot of trust in whether they're religious organizations, government bodies, corporations, anything really. How can we, as individuals, critically assess the situation? Especially when the sheer speed of rumor and accusation so dramatically outpaces the often slow, methodical pace of institutional fact-finding and due process. In this case, the sources did give us some concrete details to hold on to. They gave us specifics about the governance structure of that 5-monk committee, the abbot as chair, the claim of regular accounting records. They also gave us specific official denials from the abbot, like the flat refutation of the 30 million bat house purchase rumor. The relevance here, I think, is learning to actively look for and use those documented specifics, the verifiable details, the official statements to challenge or at least question the broad, often vague and unsubstantiated allegations that tend to dominate the initial online narrative.
Absolutely. And perhaps the most vital distinction to grasp, the one to keep firmly in mind, is the difference between a voluntary act like disrobing, explicitly undertaken by a respected individual, framed as protecting an organization's image, and a sanctioned departure, one based on proven facts, investigations, or admissions. They are fundamentally different situations, even if the outcome of the person leaving looks the same on the surface. Your ability as a listener to track the specifics of the source material. What does the official documentation actually say? What was the stated structure of oversight? What were the formal denials? That ability is probably your strongest defense against getting swept away by the noise and speculation. We really encourage you to keep that critical distinction front of mind whenever you encounter complex, fast-moving narratives like this one.